With regard to soy products like tofu or soy milk, some people have had the concern that this could increase estrogens in a woman's body and lead to cancer. That's the idea. We've had more than enough time to study that. And in fact, as long back as about 2004, there were quite a number of studies that had addressed this directly. And what they found is that those women consuming the most soy turned out to have lower cancer rates, not higher, but lower. Not hugely, but about 30% lower. So in other words, if a woman eats more tofu or has more soy milk or soy yogurt, her risk of developing breast cancer is about 30% less than those women who are avoiding soy.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 137, Dr. Neal Barnard MD, Your Body in Balance, the New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power. So tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hi there, my friends. How are you doing during these difficult days of coronavirus? My heart is with you guys, all of you out there that have lost your jobs or your family members to this virus. Gosh, I can only imagine how hard this must be. And I'm really saddened that no one's speaking about how to build our immune systems to fight this virus. And that's by eating a healthy plant-based diet. We know that all of those people with these underlying diseases such as obesity and high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases, which are all known as lifestyle diseases, are at the highest risk. And today, my guest is America's #1 plant-based doctor who has worked endlessly to teach people the truths about how food and nutrition can heal many of these lifestyle diseases that so many people are dying from unnecessarily, even before the coronavirus. Dr. Neal Barnard, MD, that's my guest today, and he's an expert on type 2 diabetes and so many other lifestyle diseases that are healed with plant-based diets. And he has worked endlessly to teach people that it's the fat, not the carbs, that are what are contributing to so many of these diseases, especially in type 2 diabetes. Even today, the medical schools are teaching people low-carb diets when they're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. It's frustrating. Dr. Neal and all his colleagues have been talking about the fat in the diet as the cause of type 2 diabetes, I don't know, for at least 20 years, I think. So it's not new news. It's frustrating, though. So today I get to speak with Dr. Neal about his new book, and that book is called Your Body in Balance, the New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health. I was super excited to hear he was writing this book because so many people suffer from hormone imbalances. And we need a book that talked about how food directly relates to our hormone imbalances, or how we can use food to balance our hormones. This subject, you guys, is not only for women, because men suffer from hormone imbalances too. They can have erection issues or prostate problems, sleep problems, weight gain, and so much more. So today's episode is for all of us, because most of us have hormonal imbalances due to all the environmental toxins that often mimic themselves as hormones, and they wreak havoc on the body. And then let's not forget about all the people eating animal products still that are filled with hormones, and they're getting themselves very sick just by eating the diet that they probably think is healthy for them. So I'm really excited to talk to Dr. Neal Barnard today because he's going to tell us his experience in treating a lot of patients with many different kind of endocrine disorders, whether it's thyroid or diabetes or PMS or menopause or erection problems or all kinds of other hormone imbalances. And he's going to tell us today his experience from using food with his patients, that some of them were able to get completely off medications, avoid surgeries, and totally transform their life just from changing their diet. So I think this is a book that we've all been waiting for a long time. And Dr. Neal's the expert, and I can't wait to ask him tons of questions about this. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Neal. Even though he doesn't need much introduction, I still want to tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Neal Barnard MD, FACC, is an adjunct associate professor of medicine at the George Washington University School of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is also known as PCRM. Dr. Barnard has led numerous research studies investigating the effects of diet on diabetes, body weight, and chronic pain, including a groundbreaking study of dietary interventions in type 2 diabetes that was funded by the National Institute of Health, that paved the way for viewing type 2 diabetes as a potentially reversible condition for many patients. Dr. Barnard has authored more than 90 scientific publications and 20 books for medical and lay readers, and he is the editor-in-chief of the Nutrition Guide for Clinicians, a textbook made available to all U.S. medical students. Today we're going to speak to Dr. Neal about his new book that's called Your Body in Balance, The New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health. But as president of the Physicians Committee, Dr. Barnard leads programs advocating for preventive medicine, good nutrition, and higher ethical standards in research. His research contributed to the acceptance of plant-based diets in the dietary guidelines for all Americans. His bio is so extensive, you guys, and if you want to read about all his accomplishments, you can do that on his website, which is pcrm.org. But right now, I can't wait for you to hear Dr. Neal speak about his work using food and nutrition in relation to hormone health and how it's directly changed the many lives of his patients who had endocrine disorders or diseases. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this one because Dr. Neal's going to keep you entertained. All right, here we go. Hi, Dr. Neal. Thank you so much for being on my show again. I've been really looking forward to this because I'm really interested in your new book coming out, and I want your thoughts on this current situation with COVID-19. So welcome back to the Vidal Speaks podcast.
Thank you. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, you've done a lot of hard work. I've been watching your videos and following you, and you're really a trooper out there in your boots in these days of coronavirus. So thank you for all of that. And before we get into your book, though, can we just talk for a few minutes about COVID-19?
Of course, you bet.
Okay, because I know at the end of the show, I'm going to ask you guys for you to tell all my listeners about your channel and all this stuff. But I'm just curious, like, what's your experience there? Like, how has it been? And, you know, are people getting the message? Because, you know, everybody's talking about vaccines and drugs and treatment and all that's probably at some point maybe important, but nobody's really talking about the real issue is why are we getting so sick?
Well, we can only hope that there will be a vaccine and there will be effective treatments. For the moment, there are not. And when we look at this virus, for some people, they acquire it. They get no symptoms. They never even know they had it. There are others for whom it's mildly symptomatic. There are others for whom it becomes quite severe. They may end up being in the hospital, the ICU, on ventilation, and of course, there are many who die, and the numbers are getting worse and worse and worse day by day. The difference between life and death in a great many cases is some underlying medical condition that makes you more vulnerable. And that can be obesity, it can be hypertension, it can be diabetes, lung disease, heart disease. And so we have been saying ever since the beginning that while we definitely do need to take steps to avoid contracting the virus, such as wearing a mask, washing our hands, and social distancing, we also have to take steps to protect ourselves for when those initial lines of defense don't succeed. As sooner or later they're going to fail. And so a healthy diet is what really can tackle all of those underlying conditions.
Yeah, and I think, no one's talking enough about the immune system, and this is what I love about your new book about food and hormones, because people always seem to think about food last for anything, and then this is such an incredible time right now. And I've listened to a lot of your videos where you talk about these underlying conditions, especially high blood pressure and high blood pressure medications. So I'm wondering, can you speak a little bit about that? Why is it this medication and this underlying condition that makes them at higher risk?
There are a whole series of issues here. With regard to high blood pressure, right at the beginning when the pandemic emerged in China, it was clear that people with high blood pressure were more likely to have a very bad course, more likely to die. And some of the suspicion fell on blood pressure medications because the group of drugs called ACE inhibitors tend to cause a certain receptor to become more prevalent on the surface of the cell, and that receptor happens to be the welcome mat for COVID. In other words, when people were taking the drug, it appeared that their bodies would make more of the receptor that would allow the virus to enter the body. However, other researchers have looked at this, and it now appears that the problem with high blood pressure is probably not the medications that are used to treat it. It's probably the high blood pressure itself, and more importantly, the damage that it will do to the body. High blood pressure is trouble for the heart, of course, and the kidneys. Diabetes is an interesting one. If you have diabetes, you're more likely to die of this disease compared with a person who catches the virus but doesn't have diabetes. And if you look at people who have diabetes in poor control, so their blood sugars are higher, their mortality is around 11%.
And when you say higher, what kind of blood sugar are you talking about?
Oh, an A1C I forget the exact numbers, but in China they did a good study where the blood sugars, I believe the A1Cs were something around maybe 8.3, something like that. So not in good control, but not in horrendous control, but in the area where a lot of people are. Compared with people who were in better control, say they might have an A1C in the 7s. So still not under great control, but under better control. The mortality was 11% for those in poor control, 1% for those in good control. The point that we have made is to control high blood pressure and to control diabetes, you can use medications, good on you. You can also use a plant-based diet, and best of all, you use a combination where you start with the diet. Whatever the diet won't do, you use medications to get you there.
Right, and in your experience, like let's say someone right now is at high risk to catch coronavirus because they have all these underlying conditions. Do you think they can make significant progress by doing a 100% plant-based diet, say in a few months?
Oh, much sooner than that. If a person has high blood pressure and they greatly increase vegetables and fruits, reduce meat, reduce fat, ideally throw out the meat and animal products altogether, their blood pressure is going to be lower within a couple of weeks on average. That's the lesson we learned from the DASH study, the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension study, DASH study.
So this DASH study measured, what was it? I've heard of that again, but can you remind me, what is it? Measured what?
Yes. Yeah, it was the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension was a study done back in the 1990s, the late 90s. And researchers were impressed by the fact that vegan and vegetarian diets were associated with low blood pressure. But they decided people might not want to follow a vegan or vegetarian diet. So they made it sort of almost vegetarian. They reduced meat and they increased vegetables and fruit, that kind of stuff. And they found that, even though it wasn't as good as the vegan diet, it was still good. So reducing meat helped. And the beauty of it was the study was only 8 weeks long.
That's great.
But blood pressure dropped within 2 weeks. So it means, let's say somebody's going to cough on you and you're going to get the virus, and that's going to happen 15 days from now. Wouldn't you be glad if today you started a low-fat vegan diet to bring down your blood pressure so that you're healthier when the virus comes calling?
Yeah, that should give you incentive. That's why I'm also doing, my work in this area to try to get people to see the relationship, because all they're really hearing is about the treatments, not the underlying. They tell us, okay, it's all because of underlying conditions, but there isn't really been, other than the alternative doctors and all the people who are in this field anyway, speaking about this. We know the relationship of food on our health, but it just seems like they should be more people talking about in the mainstream for these people to realize that in 2 weeks they could make such a gigantic move to protect themselves and build their immune system, and that would make them ultimately safer and lessen their fear.
The same can happen with diabetes. Back in 2003, the U.S. government funded our team to test a plant-based diet for type 2 diabetes, and it works great. And for many people, if they're on insulin or other powerful drugs, and they start a vegan diet, often within a week or 2 weeks, their blood sugar starts improving so much that they have to start cutting back on their medication.
Yeah.
Sometimes they get off their insulin altogether. They love that, of course. But it also means that you have more, as you get under better control, you're safer against COVID.
Right. And so in my homeopathic practice for 25 years, I saw a lot of, this is why I'm so interested in your new book, a lot of hormone, endocrine system issues and diabetes. And for those always changing diets, the hardest thing, homeopathy was easy in comparison to talk people to go on plant-based. But, I had a couple people that they did go over. And in my experience, it's like you said, and when you look at people like the Gerson Clinic, and the True North and all these places that do fasting and plant-based eating, you see most people are off their medication. So, but I had a couple people that seemed to do it quite well, and they weren't even on medication to begin with, but their numbers just never budged. They were like maybe 130, 150, and they just wouldn't come down. And the only thing I can think is that maybe they were adding in some fats, because I know your take on diabetes is so different than what they're told by their doctor. They think it's carbs, and they restrain from eating potatoes and rice and vegetables because they're all worried about carbs. But your take, and that's what I've learned over the years through all of you guys and my own training, is that it's more about the fats, right?
Well, yes. If we didn't have the technology before that we have now, a person who's got type 2 diabetes, if you use a technique called magnetic resonance spectroscopy, which it's expensive, it's challenging, not every place can do it, and most places can't. But through magnetic resonance spectroscopy, you can look inside the liver, you can look inside the muscles, and you see something. What you see is that the individual muscle cell has actually accumulated particles of fat inside the cell. And the more they build up, the more it impairs insulin's ability to work. That's critical because insulin comes out of the pancreas. It goes through the bloodstream and it arrives at the surface of that muscle cell, and it's like a key. It's supposed to open up that muscle cell to allow the glucose to come inside. But as long as that fat builds up, the insulin can't do its job. And before we had MR spectroscopy, it was something that you couldn't really measure. Well, now you can measure it. And when people get the fat out of their diets, I mean, throw out the animal products completely. Once you do that, there's no animal fat left in your diet. Keep the oils low, so don't slather oil all over your foods. And what you discover is the oil starts to come out of your muscle cells.
Yeah, that is so interesting, because that's not the message that most people are getting. I have still so many people, and even my nephew who's studying medicine, he's in his residency right now in New York, and he's an osteopathic doctor, and still, he's saying to, just like the person that he knows that has just higher sugars, it's got to stop eating carbs, and it's not about that. I mean, I don't want to see them stop eating their rice and soy and veggies, but this is what they still think, and these are young medical students, and it's so sad that why don't they know this about the fat?
It's funny. If you ask them about the latest Instagram post, they could tell you about something that came up 15 minutes ago. But if you ask them about intramyocellular lipid and the treatment of diabetes and so forth, they will tell you things from the 1970s that they think are still true today. It is astounding how backward medicine is.
God, it's so frustrating.
These discoveries that we have made and that others have made that are clearly true, and that through modern technology has allowed us to assess, have just eluded people, and they're really speaking with 1950s nutritional advice, unfortunately.
And I know, like, you've dedicated a lot of your life as an internist and doctor to type 2 diabetes, and probably type 1 too. But I know a lot of your work and your books about type 2 diabetes, so I always have considered you the expert of experts. And I've known this about the fat probably as soon as you started talking about it. So it feels like it's forever, and it's like, get with the program, doctors, because they're scaring these people away from eating healthy.
And let's give credit where credit is due. There are many scientists who have been doing this very work. Jerry Schulman and Kit Peterson at Yale University have been pioneering this and made these discoveries. And it's not as if they aren't getting the word out. They publish their findings in very prominent journals. Dr. Schulman gave a huge lecture at the American Diabetes Association last year, very well attended. So it's not as if the scientific community hasn't heard this message. It's somehow there's a disconnect between what scientists know to be true and what your average person does. It's a little bit like climate change or anything else, where scientists have found something, and then there's sort of wishful thinking or voodoo that is dictating what your average person is doing. This will change. I don't want to say that people aren't changing. There are a great many people now who are using completely plant-based diets to improve their type 2 diabetes, and they do really very well with it.
So, but for the person that is doing plant-based and not able to get their sugars down, then it would be because they've got still too much fat, likely.
Yeah, when a person gets the animal products out of the diet, a couple things happen. You get rid of all the animal fat. You also get rid of all the foods that don't have fiber. A pork chop or a chicken breast, it's got a chicken breast has chicken fat, but it also doesn't have what the plant has. It doesn't have any fiber, and you need the things that plants offer in order to be healthy. And then plants, of course, as you were saying earlier, they have the healthy complex carbohydrate that is the fuel for your body. So a plant-based diet is the diet for preventing and managing diabetes. So
are there any foods on the plant-based list that you tell your diabetic type 2 patients to avoid?
Yeah, if they're trying to get the fat out of their cells, then certain fatty foods are good to steer clear from, and those would be nuts and seeds and avocado, probably. And also just use of vegetable oils. You want to learn non-oil cooking techniques.
Yeah, that's tricky, but once you learn it, it's not that hard. And
you gotta go to the store and get a nonstick pan, and you just suddenly aren't adding grease to it anymore. And so if you're grilling your tempeh or tofu, you just don't use grease anymore.
Yeah. And you can saute in vegetable broth. That works really well. But I think, too, that a lot of people eat out, and that's where it's hard to avoid the fat.
You said it. Restaurateurs, they can provide a vegan meal for anybody. They really can. An Italian restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, Japanese restaurant, they all have vegan choices, and lots of them. But they're in love with their olive oil. Japanese foods probably are the lowest fat. You get a cucumber roll or an asparagus roll or sweet potato roll, seaweed salad. They're not going to add a lot of fat, but you go and get a plate of spaghetti, and a lot of times they put a lot of grease in the sauce.
Yeah. So as a person like you or me that's been on a plant-based diet forever and feels healthy, do you think it's okay to use a little spray of olive oil here and there if you're doing something?
Everybody can get away with a little bit here and there. It really depends on where you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you're teetering on the edge of bad diabetes and things, it's good to be as strict as you possibly can, and to really try to turn these things around. That when you're away from home, you have less control, so things aren't going to be as perfect as they were when you were actually making them.
Yeah. So last question, then I want to hear about your book. But do you know many vegans that got the coronavirus that were whole food, plant-based, low fat?
No, I don't. It's not. It's really hard to say. One might speculate that a person on a vegan diet is going to be more likely to do well if they got the disease, or even be asymptomatic, because they're less likely to be obese, less likely to have the underlying conditions. But there hasn't been really good tracking of any of this yet, so it's too early to know.
Yeah, I was just figuring you probably know a lot of vegans, and if you have known of any that got it and got sick, I'm sure a lot of vegans have maybe even got infected, but maybe were totally asymptomatic or mild and over it in a week or two like anything else. But actually just was curious if you knew of any healthy vegan like that you know, that they got taken down. I don't, but I just was curious if you did.
It's a great question. You know, vegans are health conscious people anyway. So they not only have the best diet around, but they also are more likely to exercise. And they're probably the first one to use a mask and that kind of stuff.
Probably, yeah. Even though you're doing it for the other person, it's still a compassionate action.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us the title of your book, and when is it out, or when is it going to be available?
It is out, and it's called Your Body in Balance: The New Science of Food, Hormones, and Health. It's all about how foods affect hormonal conditions. So, for example, if you imagine a couple that's been dealing with infertility and never realizing that the cause was that their hormones weren't quite in the right balance, or a person who's got diabetes never knowing that a diet change could help them, or a young woman who's got terrible menstrual cramps, or an older woman who's now dealing with hot flashes. In all of these cases, the issue is our hormones, and our hormones getting out of balance. And once you got the owner's manual for using foods to dial your hormones back into balance, your health can just be in a better place than it's ever been.
And this is really an important message to come out, because as I said, even early on in my practice, I saw so many hormone imbalance, whether it was the thyroid or diabetes, or it just, the list can go on, because menopausal symptoms can be so, I don't know, life-changing for many people. For many women, they can't sleep, they're drenching in sweats, and it's just a horrible thing. And so it's really cool that you're really specifically linking the vegan plant-based foods to hormone health. And that's something that I think is so needed out there, because even still today, I get people writing me all the time, you know, my hair's falling out, or my thyroid is still bad, or I'm tired all the time, or I just, you know, diabetes and it's out of control, or whatever, and what can I do? But they just don't think about nutrition or food first. So it's really awesome that you're doing that. And I'm just wonder, in your experience, I mean, when you talk about hormone health, this isn't a show about women, because men also have their issues with hormone health too.
Yeah, they certainly do. Although I have to say, what sent me down this path was something that I, as a man, have never experienced, and that's menstrual cramps. I was sitting at my desk one day, and the phone rang, and it was a young woman with just terrible cramps. And many women have menstrual cramps, but for about maybe 1 in 10 or so, they're just off the scale, practically disabling. And I started she was asking for painkillers, and I said, well, I can give you painkillers. But I thought, in addition to that, how are we going to stop this from happening again next month? And I realized that the problem is probably this. If your body has too much estrogen, it's the female sex hormone, that estrogen every month is thickening up the uterine lining too much. And that means that the cramps at the end of the month are going to be more intense because that uterine lining, the thicker it is, the more pain you have at the end of the month. So I realized that you can bring estrogen down by cutting back on fatty foods, by increasing fiber, by avoiding cheese and avoiding dairy products. And so I suggested to her, I said, how about this? Let me give you painkillers now. But for the next month, a low-fat vegan diet. So no animal products, keep oils really, really low. She tried it, and she called me back a month later, and she was totally pain-free. She said her period arrived with zero pain. And I thought, well, that's intriguing. So we then did a study with a large group of women, and it worked. And so then in the course of this study, we found that there was a woman who was infertile, or so she thought. And in the course of the study, she got pregnant completely unexpectedly. She later ended up having 3 children. And so what we started to see is that when you get the hormones into the right balance, menstrual pain can go away. Fertility can improve for many people. All of these things that people thought were hopeless, that they were stuck with, suddenly becomes something that they can control, which is a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, and it's so without medications that have so many side effects. And I'm curious your take on this, because I know you speak a lot about how important fiber is in the diet and that we're more like fiber deprived. What do you think about either like people doing long juice fasting for detoxing and just juices in general with no fiber? I know there's a place for both, so I'm not saying to have a low fiber diet at all, because you're going to get that from your vegetables and your salads and all your grains. But just like if someone wanted to do, there's people who do these 30-day juice cleanses where they're just drinking juice. I would like to know your take on juicing.
We have not done those here at our research center, but I have no argument with people who would like to do those. The only suggestion that I have is if you're doing an extended fast, and particularly if it's a water-only fast, that you really have to do something like that with medical supervision, because you can end up really not having the nutrients that your body needs. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but you need somebody to be watching you every day at a place like True North, for example.
Yeah, exactly. That's always really important. So in this book, do you talk about certain conditions like thyroid problems and menopausal problems and diabetes problems? Do you break it down like that with food?
Yes. Yep. We start off with sex hormones. So sex hormones, that means menstrual cramps. It means endometriosis, which is for many women a terribly painful condition. It also leads to infertility. And we have seen some of the most remarkable recoveries from people who are able to make diet changes to get their hormones back in balance. For men, this means prostate cancer. We also talk about erectile dysfunction. It's amazing to see how quickly that will improve for many men once they follow a plant-based diet.
And with men that have those problems, isn't that the similar problem to plaquing in the arteries in general?
Exactly right. In fact, it's actually not really a hormonal issue. They might think it is, but it's not. It's narrowed arteries, and in the same way that a plant-based diet will reopen the arteries to the heart, it can widen the arteries to the private parts too, and that makes the erectile dysfunction get better.
And what about to the brain? If you have plaquing in the brain, like early Alzheimer's, could the plaque come out of there too?
We do have to presume that the same artery changes that will occur, say, in the coronary arteries to the heart are going to happen anywhere in the body, because it's a systemic condition. So there's every reason to think you'll get benefits everywhere. And the only admonition I would have is that people should start a healthy plant-based diet as early in life as possible. There is never a time when it's too late, but it's always a good thing to take advantage of the power of a plant-based diet really early on.
Time to take a little break and get a drink. And while you do that, you can click on the link in the show notes to buy Dr. Neal Barnard's new book, Body in Balance. Anytime you guys purchase on Amazon, I'd so appreciate it if you would use my Amazon link from Vidal Speaks. Just go to vidalspeaks.com and click on the link under the opening banner photo, and it'll take you right to Amazon. And if you bookmark that, then every time you make a purchase from Amazon, you'll be using the Vidal Speaks link. And you know I'll love you forever. All right, you guys ready? Let's get back to the show. Yeah, and in your experience where you've put people, because I was wondering, how you got started on this journey, and then you said it's often our patients that teach us the most. So when you were doing this experiment with your patients and putting them on diets and seeing all these wonderful changes, did you ever find that certain foods were better for menopause and certain foods are better for thyroid, or is it just the general healthy diet of plant-based?
When it comes to menopause, there has certainly been both some general and some specific things. The general things are that the more a person sheds excess weight, the better they do. By better, I mean less hot flashes. And that can be true even after the hot flashes started. If a woman goes on a healthy plant-based diet and her weight starts diminishing, she's going to generally feel better. But in addition to that, what we find is that soy for some women is helpful. And what that really means, that might mean tofu or miso or tempeh. For some women, though, it means using soy extracts. And I got a call about 2 weeks ago from a woman who had been dealing with terrible hot flashes. She was on a vegan diet, and she found that the secret for her was to take out her pressure cooker. And she would get some soybeans and put them in the pressure cooker and cook up a batch. And every day she'd have a half a cup of cooked soybeans, maybe mixed with other foods and stews or something like that. And within about 3 days, her hot flashes were gone. So what we think is the combination of a plant-based diet and soy might be helpful.
And that's my experience too, that many women did good with soy, and it's sad it has such a bad rap because there is bad soy out there that they feed to all the animals, and it's crappy in quality because it's all GMO and it's horrible. But healthy soy has just gotten a really bad rap in the plant-based world, and so many people just avoid it like the plague, when really for menopause especially, it's been only helpful in my experience with people.
Well, let's tackle some of these myths actually. With regard to soy products like tofu or soy milk, some people have had the concern that this could increase estrogens in a woman's body and lead to cancer. That's the idea. We've had more than enough time to study that. And in fact, as long back as about 2004, there were quite a number of studies that had addressed this directly. And what they found is that those women consuming the most soy turned out to have lower cancer rates, not higher, but lower. Not hugely, but about 30% lower. So in other words, if a woman eats more tofu or has more soy milk or soy yogurt, her risk of developing breast cancer is about 30% less than those women who are avoiding soy. And then as the years go by, more and more studies have shown that exact finding. So it's now confirmed. It's not controversial anymore. Soy reduces the risk of developing breast cancer. The other thing, though, is for women who have been diagnosed with cancer in the past. They had breast cancer, they were treated, they want their cancer never to come back. There again, the women consuming the most soy have about a 30% reduction in their likelihood of dying of cancer. So now you're talking about something that's really important. You don't have to have soy, it's totally optional, but it does not cause breast cancer. It does the opposite. It makes cancer less likely to strike and less likely to kill you if you got cancer.
So that's very good that they've kind of done that, and I hope more people can hear this and learn that, because that is a food that so many steer away from, which I believe they shouldn't. But just beans in general, like beans and also grains, these two foods, Even within the vegan world, there's people who say don't eat any grains and beans, don't do beans. And I know you use beans and grains in your recipes and you've advocated them so I just wonder, like, why do you think that is that so many think beans and grains should be avoided?
Yeah. Every now and then someone is trying to maybe sell a controversial book or something like that. And so they'll say beans are this or grains are that or something like that. But when you look either at large populations and find that people who eat beans and grains tend to be the healthiest, thinnest people, or you look at a randomized clinical trial where you show that people who switch from a meaty diet to a diet rich in grains and beans and vegetables and fruits, in either case, you find that these foods are healthful and really tremendously useful for reversing disease.
And do you feel like the people who say they can't tolerate the grains, it's just because they have a digestive issue? It's not the grains themselves?
Well, it might depend on what grade you're talking about. A little bit less than 1% of the population does, in fact, have celiac disease. And celiac disease means that gluten tears up your digestive tract. And gluten is in wheat, it's in barley, it's in rye. And if you've got celiac disease, you can't have those foods. Luckily, that's less than 1% of the population. But those people can have rice or oats or corn. They can have the gluten-free grains and beans and vegetables and fruits, but they just can't have wheat and barley and rye. And if there's anything that you don't tolerate, I mean, you should avoid it. But by and large, people do very, very well with grains and beans and vegetables and fruits.
So you don't limit them in any form. You don't say only have this much or this many times a week. If someone loves grains and beans, would you be okay that they eat them every day?
As many times a day as they want. It's like saying how much oxygen, is too much oxygen. I mean, if you breathe,
yeah, that's how,
don't worry about it. These are the foods our bodies are designed for.
Well, I asked you that because as, a person who was poisoned on the golf course from the chemicals, I was really sick when I had to leave the tour, and I was already a vegan, and I had to get myself well through like detoxing and really even cleaning up my diet more. And I've always that's kind of the food I grew up on. My dad's, from Puerto Rico, and it's like rice and beans, and this is what they live on and eat. And my mom was British, and she learned to be an English Puerto Rican cook. So we grew up on eating foods like this. And when I started doing like special diets, like let's just say like juicing only or raw food, I've tried to be a raw foodist like 5 times, but I always feel so bad on that diet. And you have to listen to your body. I just don't feel good on that diet to eat raw veggies. But then you get this implanted in your mind from all these people that say like raw foods are the only way you're going to get your nutrients because you're cooking everything out and all the enzymes are cooked out. So I would love to hear your take on this, because I know you get people well and they're eating cooked food and they're eating beans and grains. So I'd like to hear your take on why, that is okay, and that idea that only raw foods you get all the enzymes from and the other stuff is empty.
Cooked foods are fine. I mean, if you look at the healthiest, longest lived people on the planet, they're eating lots of cooked grains and beans and those kinds of things. Now, having said that, I think raw foods can be very, very healthy too. The challenge that we have is that we don't really know which ones they are. I have to believe that before the advent of fire, when people couldn't cook things, they were eating raw food. Way back when, human beings originated in probably Eastern Africa, Northeast Africa, somewhere around there. But I'm not sure what the foods were that were around. They weren't tomatoes and peanuts and things like that, those are North American foods. So I imagine in the same way as our cousins, chimpanzees and gorillas, people study them and they figure out what foods they're eating. The oil nut palm and various things. You could probably figure out which foods were human beings' first choices back millions of years ago. But in the absence of that information, we have to go by what is now tried and true now. And our evidence clearly suggests that people who are eating animal products do not do as well. People who eat entirely plant-based diets do far better. And the rules, I should say are simple, but they should be articulated. And that's 4 groups: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes. Or legumes that's the beans, peas, lentils group. So vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes. Take vitamin B12 also. You need vitamin B12 for healthy nerves and healthy blood. Either get it in a multiple vitamin, which it's in all multiple vitamins, or just go to the store and get a B12 supplement. Either way, you want to make sure you take it.
And how much, not every day or just a couple times a week, or how much is good of vitamin B12?
The amount your body needs is 2.4 micrograms per day. And you will never see a supplement that is quite that small. But I think the safest thing is to take it every day. Take a small, whatever, go to the drugstore or the health food store. Just get whichever is the smallest one they sell and take that every day. If they don't sell any small ones, if all you can get is 1,000 micrograms, then take that every other day.
Okay, that's good advice. And do you recommend any other supplements for hormones in particular, or just for health?
Vitamin D is one to consider. It normally comes from sunlight on your skin. And if you're out in the sun on a regular basis, on the golf course or somewhere else, you don't really need to take a vitamin D supplement. But if you're indoors all day, then you should probably take vitamin D. And the typical dose that doctors are pushing for nowadays is around 2,000 international units a day.
Okay. And since you were speaking about the menopausal symptoms, what do you recommend as far as women who want to take natural progesterone or estrogen? Do you try to get them off of that and do it solely with food first?
I am quite concerned about taking estrogens, whether it's natural or not. Natural progesterone, I think, is a different matter. But the estrogens, whether they're bioidentical or not, increase the risk of postmenopausal breast cancer. And
the natural progesterone, have you experienced that once people eat the way that your book is advocating for them to eat, that they likely wouldn't need it?
I don't know. There are people who have felt that there are benefits to natural progesterone. It's not something that we prescribe here, but I wouldn't necessarily criticize it at all. Uh-huh. Back to estrogen for a minute. Let me make maybe one exception with regard to estrogens. And if a woman is trying to control hot flashes, my suggestion is not to use estrogens for that, because you're going to be on it for a long time. It's going to increase the risk of breast cancer and other problems. And I think it's better to just not use the estrogens. And I know that for some women that's asking a lot, because they might be suffering with their hot flashes. But when a woman takes the estrogen products, at some point her doctor is going to say, this is enough. I can't keep prescribing this because your cancer risk is just rising day by day. So the doctor stops it. And then what happens? At that point, the hot flashes kick in because they've just been delayed. So I'm not sure what we've accomplished by doing that.
Yeah.
However, for other symptoms, let's say a woman is having more sexual issues with vaginal dryness, and she would like to be sexually active, but menopause is creating problems. In that case, rather than a systemic estrogen, in other words, rather than swallowing it, where it affects the whole body, just use a local one, where you use a cream and it has more of a local effect. We don't have lots of evidence one way or the other about long-term risks, but what we have suggests that it's substantially safer than an oral estrogen.
Well, that's good to know. So what about thyroid problems, Dr. Neal? This is the next one you tackle in your book, because it's a common thing, especially hypothyroidism. But, there's still a lot of Graves' disease and all these other kind of hyperthyroid issues too. So what's the take on that in your hormone book?
Sure. Hypothyroidism is common, and it presents with rather vague symptoms, so that people may not realize what they've got. They're feeling sluggish, they're gaining weight, feeling cold, and so forth. And these symptoms are so common that you don't really think maybe this is a disease you have. So the doctor says, I think I need to do a blood test on you. The doctor says, well, I've got an explanation for why you gained 5 pounds and why you're feeling cold all the time and why you're sluggish and nothing seems right, and why you're constipated. You're hypothyroid. And the patient says, what are you talking about? And what the doctor explains is that your thyroid gland is at the base of your neck. And the hormone that it produces, thyroid hormone, goes through the bloodstream to all the cells of the body to give you energy. And if your thyroid gland isn't making the hormone, you don't have energy and everything kind of falls apart. So there are two reasons for that. One reason is the lack of iodine. You need iodine to make thyroid hormone. And iodine, there's really two good sources. One is iodized salt, that like Morton salt with a little, blue canister and the girl with the umbrella. That's perfectly fine. A third of a teaspoon a day gives you the iodine you need. My favorite source, though, is sea vegetables, like wakame or nori or those kinds of things. Go to your nearest sushi bar and have the vegetarian, don't have the fish sushi, but have the vegetarian sushi. Cucumber roll or something, that the nori that it's wrapped in has lots of iodine in it. So the first thing is to get enough iodine. The second thing is to avoid animal products because animal products appear to trigger, at least for some people, they seem to trigger the formation of antibodies that can damage the thyroid.
And that's when they start getting like Graves or Hashimoto's.
Right. Yeah. And so the people know what these words mean. Graves' disease is an autoimmune condition where antibodies formed within your body are disrupting the control of the thyroid gland so that basically it doesn't turn off and your gland is making too much thyroid hormone. Somehow these antibodies that ought to be attacking a virus, or antibodies ought to attack a bacterium, now they're attacking you. They're attacking the thyroid regulatory machinery. Now, the antibodies can attack the thyroid itself. They can attack its ability to make the hormone. When that happens, you have too little hormone. So it's the opposite of Graves' disease. You've got too little hormone. That's hypothyroidism, and it's called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And in the United States, that's actually the most common cause of low thyroid.
And can these people get off medication, or many of them, just by change of diet?
We don't have good randomized trials to know, but I would encourage people to try it and see. And in Your Body in Balance, my new book, I describe several people who have done exactly that. It's totally safe to do. And we've been very encouraged by the fact that when you look at large populations, people who avoid animal products have the lowest risk of either hypo or hyperthyroidism. And so that has, and people who do the worst are the people who include animal products in their diet. So that has suggested, why not try it, get away from animal products, see what happens. And we have a number of cases of people who have done exactly that. They've gotten dramatically better. But how often you're going to see that success, we don't know, because we don't have good trials.
Yeah. And then another question just about the thyroid, because when you go to a doctor and you do your blood test, which is how they test your thyroid, and they say, okay, you're hypothyroid, your thyroid's running slow, and that's why you're cold and overweight and constipated and losing your hair and other stuff. Okay, they put them on medication, and that medication, there's a little bit of controversy over that, because I've always learned that it doesn't include the T3, which is it's in the conversion that's important. So have you experienced that, where people maybe do better with a whole thyroid? I don't know, I say supplement, but it's really prescription, like Armour Thyroid. Have you had any experience with that?
We have not put that to the test. And as you can see, there's a lot more that we do need to know. And I'm really hoping that we'll be able to test this more and more, and so that people can actually test what the dietary factors can do, because there's substantial evidence that it would be a good way to go.
Yeah, that's cool. And another condition in your book you speak about is mood problems, and that's another gigantic one, because people wouldn't associate that with hormones, but it has a lot to do with hormone balance when you're depressed or not depressed, or even anxious, right?
That's something that we stumbled into completely accidentally. Years ago, about 10 years ago, we were doing a study with Geico, the car insurance company. And the reason we were doing it was, at any big business, whether it's Geico or any other, you got a lot of people there working. Some of them have weight problems that they'd like to improve. Some of them have diabetes they'd like to get better. So we decided to see what would happen if the employer provided a class right at work for people who wanted to do a healthy diet. So we did that, and we did it in 10 different cities that had Geico facilities. And what we found was really surprising. Well, what wasn't surprising was that people lost weight on a vegan diet. And that's pretty predictable. And the diabetes got substantially better. But in addition to that, we discovered that mood started to improve. And so we did paper and pencil tests that would rate the severity of depression, that would rate anxiety. And we found that these improved as people began the diet. And then we looked at job absenteeism, just are you at work? Are you not at work? And we found that that improved too. So part of that is because if you're slimmer and you're healthier, you're feeling more empowered. I think that's all part of it. But food affects the brain too. Some of that is indirect. It affects the gut, and a healthier gut leads to a healthier brain. Food can have an anti-inflammatory effect, and that in turn can affect the brain. So we think there are both probably physical and psychological reasons why a diet change helps.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's for sure. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the recipes in your book. How many are there, and who created those recipes for you?
Oh, you know what? The person I worked with to do this is Lindsay S. Nixon, and she is just a genius in the kitchen. She gave me 65 recipes. They're all in Your Body in Balance. They are all completely free of animal products. They are healthy. They are great for a person who might want to lose weight or tackle diabetes or tackle their cramps or their hot flashes. These are great recipes. But I want to tell you something. When she made the recipes, she wanted to make sure that they were really tasty and fun and familiar, but also relatively few ingredients and quick to make. And she really succeeded. The recipes are beautiful. However, when she sent them to me, she sent me a note that said, Dr. Barnard, I hope you like these recipes. But she wanted to also tell me that this way of eating cured her cramps too.
Oh my gosh.
So I am taking that as validation that we're on to something here.
Wow, that's cool. That's a good story. And what a great job for her to heal herself in her work. So that's awesome. And what about doctors? Are they catching on to this idea now that you're doing stuff like, balancing hormones with food? I mean, are they taking that as you're the weird still doctor that's doing stuff that's so out there? Or is it becoming more of a norm that doctors are paying attention, or are they doing any further steps to learn more about nutrition?
Well, I should first say that what we do is we put it to the test in research studies. So when we've been talking about plant-based diets for diabetes or hypertension or losing weight, we can call upon clinical evidence. If there are areas where clinical evidence is lacking, we will make that clear. But we always want to go from an evidence base. Secondly, we want to make sure that everything we're doing is safe. So when we talk about a diet change, the diet that most people are on before the diet change is not very safe. I mean, they're on diets that cause weight gain and high cholesterol and increase their risk of cancer. So we want people to adopt a safer diet. So doctors are jumping on board more than ever before. And we have online sessions for doctors. And up until the COVID pandemic, we have had live courses as well. And we've had 1,000 doctors at our conferences learning about this. And then there are more and more and more of these conferences coming up. So doctors are interested in it. They love it because it saves them from just being a pill dispensary. Instead of just being a factory, keeping people on more and more medications, they're partnering with patients to help patients know what they can do for their own health. And the people who appreciate it the most are the individuals who are able to regain their health. So my message for Your Body in Balance, it's mostly for lay readers who want to do well. But I've heard from so many doctors who say they're adopting this program now for the woman with hot flashes, the couple with infertility, the young woman with menstrual pain, for the guy with erectile dysfunction, or the older man who's got prostate cancer in his family, and they want to know how to do better. So that's what Your Body in Balance is all about.
Well, that's good, because to me, there's always been two problems. One is that nutrition has not been in the medical world, and they had no training or experience at it. So they kind of, throw it out the window. But the other problem I see too is that people are just happier to grab a pill. Like Lloyd had a friend who had type 2 diabetes, and for years, he's been telling him, you can improve your diabetes and extend your life and keep your eyes and all the problems that come with diabetes type 2. And he would just say, no, my medication's controlling it fine. I'm not willing to make any changes. And now he was diagnosed with parotid gland cancer, and that's such a destructive surgery. And Lloyd sent him an article about how, and he said, you really think eating kale and this is going to change anything? It's so hard to get people to understand. Sometimes they're just not ready. You can only put it out there and then you have to let it go, because we're not somebody who push people, but you want to expose them to ideas of possibilities, how food can help heal. But many people just aren't willing to make that change.
But our job stays the same. And that's that we have to provide people with good information on things they can do for themselves and things that they can do for their families. And more people are embracing this. I think people are right to be skeptical because there are all kinds of people pushing all sorts of messages. However, we're not in that situation now. We now have abundant evidence for what works. We know what doesn't work. And our job now is to just put it to work. You also have to make it easy. Let's give people a path. Let's allow people to taste healthy foods. Don't give up your skepticism. Keep it, and then just see what benefits come from it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's really the best way to go, and it's what's good about doing things like this, because you attract the people who are just curious to start making some changes, or the ones that want to learn how to do it, and those that aren't, they're not going to be here listening. So when their time comes, then they'll find this podcast and maybe give it a try. So that's cool. So Dr. Neal, thank you so much. Before we let you go, though, tell us how people can watch those videos on YouTube that you do, and where can they buy your book and follow you on social media?
Well, thank you for asking. For more information, you might have a look at our website, which is pcrm.org. That stands for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, pcrm.org. The book is Your Body in Balance, and you will see it on Barnes & Noble and Target and Amazon and all the online booksellers. And if there happens to be somewhere in your neighborhood an actual bookstore that is open, they'll have it too. And I'm sure they would appreciate your business. And if you go on YouTube, you can look under my name, Neal Barnard, Barnard, or look under the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. See what you find. There's a world of information out there to explore.
And Dr. Neal, I know you play the guitar. Have you been doing that? I know you can't with your group, but have you been doing any of that?
Oh well, that's funny that you could ask. I didn't realize you were going to ask me that. Yes. As a matter of fact, we just released a new song. My group is called Carbon Works. And I've been a musician all my life, even before I was in medical school. And so my band is Carbon Works, as in we are made of carbon, and these are our works. And let me invite you. My group is from all over the place, and it was a few months ago we released a song. Our singer is in Italy. She lives in Rome, and she's stuck. She's in lockdown. And my violinist and cellist are in Virginia in lockdown, and I'm here in Washington, D.C. But if you go on the YouTube channel, go on YouTube and look up Carbon Works, you'll see a channel there. And you'll see lots of videos. And there's one that's called Everything's All Right. And it's also in French. The French word for that is tout ira bien. That means everything will go well. And we recorded all this kind of by long distance. And we slapped it together with a really, 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 really cute video of a bunch of animals just looking all somnolent and ready to bed down for sleep. And in this time of worry, I just want to give people 2 minutes of peace, and that's what that song is about.
That's cool.
Have a look.
And you need to come up with a theme song for your hormone book, like maybe one that's like up and down and up and down, and then it ends with this nice, soft, peaceful ballad.
I like the way you think. Anyway, I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll link that. I'll link that Carbon Works in your YouTube channel. I'll link that in the notes. So again, Dr. Neal, you're always so generous with your time, and I thank you so much. I know you have a lot of followers, and let's put this on our social media and really try to get the word out, because To me, this is a very needed book to help people understand the connection of food and hormones, specifically, not just food and health. So thank you so much.
Great talking with you today. Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye now.
I hope you guys love that one. I sure did. Dr. Neal is so gracious with his time because, he works endless hours educating people on the benefits of a plant-based diet. I feel honored he took the time to write me and accept my invitation to interview him. And once again, Dr. Neal is on the Vidal Speaks podcast, and I'm proud of that. So thank you, Dr. Neal. It's truly amazing just how much food is the medicine that nature intended for us to stay well. It's also truly amazing how much confusion there is out there and how many people are misled. And that's why I feel so privileged to have Dr. Neal on my show, because he is America's #1 expert on using food and nutrition to reverse many lifestyle diseases. And he has done all the research and he knows all the science behind it. So I like to let the experts tell you so you guys have the right information. All right, you guys, I'm going to keep it short and sweet today. But one last reminder, don't forget to sign up for the VS Club while that special rate is in effect. $10 a month. That's like almost free, you guys. And I teach you everything I know. All right, you know what time it is, right? Yep, it's that time. Time to say goodbye. But only until next week when I see you right back here around my table. So until then, eat more plants and balance those hormones. Ta-ta for now. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing, of course. Peace. Be healthy. Be free. Live life.